Can we go back to talking about Hextech chests? So, I literally took a break for 3 days. 3 days! That's it! Can this game stop burning for 1 minute? So yes, it didn't take long and we jumped from one puddle into the next. All while the theme is staying very consistent. That being the monetization of League of Legends. Mainly, once again, the main topic is the glorious gacha machine, which got a new addition. And of course, I am talking about Sahn-Uzal, also known as Human Mordekaiser. And as you may know, this skin became quite an event of its own. So let's start from the beginning. When it was first announced that we are getting a gacha skin for Mordekaiser, which would show him from a historical point we haven't seen him in before, it was very obvious we were about to get Human Mordekaiser. And so players, including me, got very hyped for what we could potentially get. And that is because in Legends of Runeterra, we actually got some rough concepts for what Human Mordekaiser could look like. And those concepts were amazing. But then the comic dropped and it showed us Mordekaiser during the barbaric ages. And there he looked somewhat fine. That comic was mostly focusing on Atakan though, so the appearance of Sahn-Uzal himself was kinda hidden. But then we got the animated trailer. And there I would say the trailer was pretty good. There were a lot of lore references in it and it was animated pretty well. And if you go back to my reaction, I just cried that it was a really cool trailer for a gacha skin. Which unfortunately means, if no gacha skins were connected to it at all, on its own it would still be a really cool cinematic showing us something from the lore. And so after this cool setup, what did we get? Is that Barbarian Scion? Yes, looking at the vast majority of the reactions for this skin, people are not too excited about it. Unfortunately, that is me included. But this is actually for 2 separate reasons. That's right, there are 2 whole reasons why people are getting underwhelmed. First of all, at a first glance, it just doesn't look that great. But more importantly, even if the vision was great, the raw quality of the skin is actually on the lower end of legendary skins. So let's break these 2 apart. Going back for a second, when this skin was announced, I was ready to be torn. I was ready to support a lore skin, especially after seeing the original concept, and I was ready to struggle against the great gacha machine. Well, Riot saved me a lot of trouble, and that's mainly because if you break it all down, this skin is quite a misread on the community. I mean, Mordekaiser has always been about metal. This was the original vision. This is why his abilities always had metal references in them. And it even stayed as his vision during the VGU. So to give Mordekaiser a skin where he is naked, well, that actually opens up a whole new debate. When you want to sell skins, there are 2 things you should consider. Do you want to appeal to the champion mains, and therefore guaranteeing profit from that specific demographic? Or do you want to make the skin appealing to the broader audience, somewhat ignoring the core, risking that it would be a flop, but exchanging it for potential higher profit? Well, that is kinda what happened here. In order for the Exalted skin to have a wider appeal, they have to serve the broader audience, which means they have to make Mordekaiser look a bit less like the true Mordekaiser, and in this case they do this by showing us what he looked like before. Because yes, in the past, Mordekaiser did not look like the Mordekaiser we have today. And that is kinda an issue for the skin. Like, I understand the barbaric Mongolian vibes. Lore-wise, this makes perfect sense. It even really fits Mordekaiser himself. But if you really wanna lean into this, it just doesn't really fit the skin you wanna make. Because this is Mordekaiser, but it doesn't feel like Mordekaiser. And what's hilarious is that if you know Mordekaiser's lore, then the first scene in the trailer is quite funny. Because the lore states that after he died, his armor was wrought in the image of his old armor. Which brings up the question, what armor exactly? I mean, sure, I like how the shoulders actually reflect the shoulders that Mordekaiser has currently. Those spikes are very Noxian. And sure, the helmet he currently has kinda mimics the crown. But missing a chest plate as well as running around in his undies, while it is very barbaric, it is not exactly screaming Mordekaiser. And you can actually see that on the model itself. Mordekaiser was animated as being a giant tank. That's why every step feels heavy. Although at times it is also quite bouncy. But well, without all the armor, he just looks slow. And dull. Which brings us to a great point. What is the gimmick of this skin? We know that exalted skins are supposed to be special, so what is happening here? Well, it evolves. By which I mean the mace changes ever so slightly. Yes, this is the Pulsefire Ezreal tech, except done slightly worse. With Pulsefire Ezreal coming out literally 12 years ago. But on top of the changing mace. In the first two forms, his ultimate are the Great Grass Fields of Valoran. Actually, lore-wise, pretty cool. Though it does look kinda flat. You can't really compare it to something like Darkstar or Project. But in the final form, it turns into a Reckoning Arena, which is really cool. But most importantly, Mordekaiser himself does get armored, but it is only in his ultimate. And even when he is in his ultimate, which is the best form he gets, he is still in his undies. And I kinda hate that. Which brings up yet another great point. Remember, this is at least a $200 skin. A skin where the model is changing over the course of the game. Which on paper is a great idea. Ignoring the fact that this is a 12-year-old idea. But in reality, this means that you are buying a really expensive skin, which looks bad at the start on purpose, and you have to work hard to make it look better in the late game. This is my biggest problem with the skin. For $200, this should be the bad form. This should be the base, and it only gets better from this point. All the gimmicks should be on top of the coolest thing you can make. This should be what you buy directly, and to be honest, this is what I imagine Sahn-Uzal to look like. Except maybe with some pants on. I mean, again, compare it to the original concept art. Gosh darn it! Which brings up yet another point. Why is Mordekaiser gold? Well, believe it or not, there is actually an interesting reason why this is the case. So, one of the reasons why this skin also doesn't feel like Mordekaiser is because it is gold. A color that has never been associated with Noxus. The only person who really utilizes it in Noxus is Mel, and that is because she has origins tied to Shurima. So Mordekaiser suddenly being gold confused a lot of people. And well, he does have a voice line that explains what's happening here. You see, he mentions that the Noxii tribes were shunned by the Rakor. Meaning that, just like something like Shurima, Noxus also has distant ties to Mount Targon. And therefore, the Targonian gold, which pretty much shaped the entirety of Shurima, also made its way into Noxian culture. At least, early on. So yes, lore-wise, the gold does make sense. It still doesn't look like Mordekaiser though, which brings up the last major point about this skin, which to many is the main deal breaker. This skin could have been an okay legendary at like 20 or 25 bucks. Sure, I can see this being a successful skin if you are not a die-hard Mordekaiser main, I guess. But truth be told, even if this was a legendary skin, it would be slightly subpar. Normally, legendary skins have unique animations, special voice lines, new spell effects, and every now and then also a new mechanic. Well, this skin does have new spell effects, which I would say are the coolest part of this skin, and it does have new voice lines, but only some of the animations are new. Most of them are just the base animations, and sometimes they are new, but they are so close to the base animations you can't tell the difference. There are plenty of videos around the internet just comparing all of the animations now. Which is hilarious because technically that makes this skin less valuable than something like Project Mordekaiser, which is a fully armored, entirely remodeled skin with extremely unique visuals. But that kinda brings us back to the main topic. A topic which we have discussed in a previous video. Because you see, it is overwhelmingly obvious now that the quality of skins just went down. I mean, Dumps even noticed that in the trailer for the skin is not properly keyed out of the green screen. For example, this is what I would look like if I did what Riot did. It saved me like 3 cents to do this, I guess. But yes, quality is just down. This could be because Riot is now outsourcing most of their skins. It could be because Riot even fired the people who managed the outsourcing of the skins. But simply said, right now it doesn't feel like they have a strong hold on cosmetics. The rule of cool should be their main motto. And it kinda isn't. And that is scary, because it really seems like Jinx was the peak of the exalted skins. And even there, people were not exactly happy. That skin always looked kinda off. I mean, TFT nailed the arcane aesthetics perfectly with their skin. And in League, she didn't even have the hood that she had in the show. And since that skin, everything is kinda just going downhill. But they will likely just keep going because they need to release a new skin every month. And Riot can't just stop making these skins because then they would have to scrap the entire system. Which would make a lot of players happy. Just maybe not the finance department. And so, finally, I would like to address one comment that I saw on the last video. When we had a look at the comic, there was someone who pointed out, well, you didn't really hate on the visuals in that comic, so why hate now? And yeah, that is fair. Except when we watched that comic, I kinda assumed that what we saw in the comic, which is the barbarian Mordekaiser, is just one version of the skin. I kinda expected that just like Jinx and Seth had 2 or 3 different forms, that Mordekaiser would get the same treatment. Just like the previous exalted skins, I kinda expected to have a barbarian Mordekaiser, which also has the ability to transform into an armored one. But instead, we got a diaper Mordekaiser. Which brings up great memories, because back in my day, we used to have Diaper Pantheon, and it was glorious.